especially for his time, especially for that. And by the way, I'm going to go out and get more people.
Okay.
Because I'm angry. Right? So please, at this time, we're going to be taking a look at what's really happening in Asia as we drive towards that connected environment for all of these aspects and what needs to be done. So let's turn it over to Dr. Kamatasamy from Comstock. Thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate it. And I have to get some people.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name's Ish Keynote. I look after CommScope's business across the Asia-Pac region. Actually, I like small crowds. Actually, intimate. We can talk one-on-one almost. The title of my presentation. Let's get it up. Okay, it's going to take a couple of seconds to get the presentation up, but the basic premise of the next 30 to 40 minutes, I'm going to be talking about how important quality is to networks, especially to physical layer networks, and I'm going to benchmark quality against two key criteria, two key metrics. One is how willing you will be as an end user, as a customer building data centers to invest in what we call intelligent infrastructure, and I'll describe that for you. And then number two is how scalable and your basic network design is going to be for your data centers. So those are the two key benchmarks I'll be looking at from a quality perspective for networks. Now, the next slide may surprise you. I guess it's going to be the first time in a data center presentation, and maybe the only time ever in a data center presentation, you're going to be seeing a piece of furniture up as the first slide. And there is method to my madness, so please hear me out. Charles Eames was a very famous designer in basically the 1950s and 60s. And the most famous piece of furniture he designed was what we call the Eames Lounger, okay? And what captivated me about Charles Eames was this actual statement that he I think he presented in the 1950s. He actually, part of a book, and he actually said, and I'll read this out for you first, eventually everything connects, people, ideas, objects. The quality of the connections is the key to quality per se, okay? And that got me thinking about connectivity generally and about the importance of quality for connectivity. I have to say, one of my concerns, shall we say, about data center build here in India in particular is that there is a rush and focus on, if you like, speed, all right? It's important to get these data centers up quickly. There's a focus on making sure these data centers are built in the most cost-effective way. I will challenge, and we can have this discussion later perhaps, I will challenge that perhaps in India there's less focus on the quality of the network. There's less focus on the scalability of the network to go from, for example, 10 gigabit capability to 40 gigabit to 100 gigabit. There's less focus on the network from an intelligence perspective because these networks are becoming increasingly complex. And if you don't have intelligence built in on day one from a design perspective into your network, into your data center design, you will struggle to manage these very highly complex networks. So that's Charles Eames, okay? And this chair, by the way, is still selling. It's was first sold in the 1950s. It's still selling now. It's a relatively expensive piece of furniture, but it stood the test of time. Let me talk about what's driving the demand for data centers. And actually, the previous speaker presented a lot of data about the reasons why data centers are growing. But I want to come at this from a slightly different angle. We know in the Asia-Pac region, we have, obviously, almost 60% of the world's population sits in the Asia-Pac region. And we have these huge cities being developed within our region, okay? And there is a definition of something called a mega city, and a mega city is defined as a city with a population of greater than 10 million. And this data is from, I think it was from the UN. It actually lists all the mega cities across the Asia-Pac region, and in terms of what we perceive the population, what we project the population will be in the year 2025. Okay, and I'm not going to go down the list, but you can see that Asia-Pac has compared to any other region, I've seen the data for the rest of the world, Asia-Pac has the most mega cities planned. Okay, obviously India plays a significant role here. China also plays a significant role here. And it's actually quite interesting there to compare and contrast with China. I look after China as well. And as we go through the presentation, I will compare and contrast with China. So we've got these huge keep calling it mega data centers, mega cities being built here in Asia. On top of that, as I've mentioned already, 2/3 of the world's population sits in Asia. In terms of millions of users connected to the internet, we have over 900 million people connected to the internet. Again, this is data from a well-established website, and it's actually quite an important website. You go into that website, the details are there. Every year they update this data. 900 million people connected. So you might say, well, that makes sense because we have the most, more than, almost 2/3 of the world's population lives in Asia. But if you look at the next slide where we talk about penetration, and penetration is what percentage of that population is actually connected to the internet. Look where Asia now sits. It was, remember on the previous slide, it was at 900 million, and most people connected, so we think it's a well-connected region. It's not. In terms of penetration, Asia has just under 24% penetration. And you compare it with most of the other well-established regions. North America, nearly 80% penetration. The question to ask now has to be, where will Asia go? Where will it be? Where should it be on this table? Because that then talks about driving force, right? And some people could argue that why wouldn't we be at 80% penetration like the US or North America region, or maybe 60%, which is where Asia is? Let's be conservative. Let's step back and let's just assume that Asia will achieve a penetration will approach the world average from a penetration perspective. So you can then start to do some sums and some numbers, and I'll show you this in a second. Let's assume Asia is going to go from 24% to roughly 30% penetration in the next few years, and that's perfectly feasible. All right, next 5 years, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. What does that do? And you start running the numbers. That means you're going to have 250 million more people connected compared to now. 250 million more people connected to the internet across Asia-Pac. I've already talked about the mega cities, and really driven by population, right? This is what's driving the growth of mega cities. But you step one layer down. Let's just talk about large cities, and I'll define a large city as a city with a population of 1 million people. Across just China and India, there are 140 cities with a population of 1 million or more. 140 cities with a population of 1 million or more. There's actual split between China and India is, I think it's roughly 100 cities in China, 40 cities in India. Okay, but nevertheless, so what is all of this urbanization, what's it driving? It's driving more infrastructure. It's driving a requirement for more infrastructure. It's driving a requirement for more services. So I actually think from a global perspective, where we sit now in Asia, particularly in a country like India, is really the center of the information explosion of the information universe. Okay, I think this is where there will be a requirement for many more for much more infrastructure and related services. And this is what's fundamentally driving the need for data centers. I guess it's logical, but then when you actually look at the numbers and you see from a population perspective, this all makes perfect sense, okay? So data centers will proliferate. When you talk about the so-called information explosion, we talk about people, individuals or companies and even countries being swamped by this tidal wave of information. And frankly, the only way you can really manage this huge growth in information is via data centers. Okay, this is exactly why data centers are exploding. Now, let's focus a little bit more on the technology. So you go back a few years, and I think the previous speaker talked about this as well. 2008, 2009, virtualization was a buzzword, all right? We talked about virtualization really from a machine perspective, all right? Server perspective, minimizing the number of servers, being more efficient in the way that we use servers. And the trend, and this is from IDC, the trend is clearly showing that we're going to move from that machine virtualization concept to what we call a virtualized data center. Okay, and it's not far away. We're talking about 2013 and beyond, basically next year. And that will drive all sorts of different constraints, and it will change the way we behave from a data center perspective in the way we design data centers in particular. So when we talk cloud, well, I always consider the concept of data center consolidation. That's what we're really talking about. Okay, you as individuals, if you're using the cloud, you don't really care where your data resides within the cloud. Okay, nevertheless, the cloud is really a consolidation of various machines, if you like, coming together, usually in these very dense clusters in geographic locations, key geographic locations around the country or certainly around the region. Data center consolidation happens because it makes sense, right? It makes commercial sense. You reduce resources, you increase productivity, but you do increase complexity. Okay, and this word complexity is important to focus on because, and as I said, you'll see in a second, how do we manage this complexity? I think that's the key. That's a key criteria. So with this consolidation,